and welcome back to another EESW Learn Coding with Scratch tutorial. Today we're going to be building a game called Robot Attack, and the aim of this game is going to be to fly our rocket ship around the screen and avoid the robots that spawn in from the edges of the screen like this. You'll notice that the robots move straight towards our rocket ship when they spawn in, but they bounce off the edges of the screen. Our rocket ship can fly through the edge of the screen like this, and we can avoid the robots using our laser, like that. Alright, I think it's time to get started. Start a new project by hitting Create up here on the top left, and that's going to take us to an empty workspace like this. Just like before, the first thing we're going to do is set up our sprites, the characters that we're going to use in the game, and the backdrops. So we don't need our cat here, but what we do need is to choose a sprite. We go down here and we choose a sprite. We need a rocket ship, a robot, and a laser. So there's our rocket ship. Here's our robot. Oops. If I can spell. There he is. And we don't have one for a laser, so we're going to draw that ourselves. We're going to go here, we're going to paint, and that'll take us to our little canvas here. What we're going to do is just paint a little oval like that. We're going to want it, well, I'd like it to be yellow. We're going to choose yellow like this. We don't need an outline, we don't need that black outline around the edges, so we can cancel that by hitting here. So we have no outline. We're going to make it nice and small and pop it right in the middle of our canvas. So now we have our laser, our rocket ship, and our robot. The next thing we're going to do is set up our backdrops. So we're going to go here, choose a backdrop, and let's search for space backdrops. There's quite a few to choose from. I quite like this galaxy one. We're going to need another backdrop for our game over screen. So we're going to make that ourselves by drawing it. So we'll go over here to paint a backdrop. We'll put let's put it with a black background, like that. We'll draw a few stars in there just to make it look nice. We'll choose some white. We'll just dot those stars around here. And we'll add some text, like this. Make it nice and big. Pop it in the middle. And let's give it a little bit of color. Make it yellow, the same color as our laser. Okay. Oops, we must remember to name it so we don't get confused. Game over. So we have two backdrops. We have Galaxy, Game Over, and our three sprites. We're ready to start coding. So let's start by clicking over here to code, and we can see that we're writing code for our backdrop. If we clicked over onto our different sprites, we would be writing code for our robot or for our laser, but I think we want to start on the backdrop. We want to set up our two variables, the score and lives. So we'll go over here to variables, make a variable. We'll call this one score, and we'll make another variable called lives. Now, when the game starts, so we'll go to events. When the green flag is clicked, when the game begins, let's set our lives to 3 and set our score to 0. Next thing we want to do is make sure that our backdrop starts as a galaxy. Now we want to write some code to tell our game to switch to the game over backdrop when we run out of lives. So we'll go over here to control and we'll use an if block. And we'll say if our lives drop below 0, so we'll use a less than operator. We'll say less than 0 and we'll get a lives block from our variables here. If lives are less than 0, then looks, switch backdrop to game over, and control stop all. So when our game starts, our lives jump to 3, and if they drop down below 0, it should switch our backdrop, and we'll be able to test that later. Alright, so now we're going to have a look at our sprites. First thing I notice is they are all way too big. So we'll go over here to our rocket ship. Let's decrease that maybe by 50%, maybe even a little bit smaller than 50%. Our giant robot needs to be smaller than the rocket, so I'm going to drop that to 30. And our laser, let's go 30 as well. You notice it only goes down to 56. That must mean that it cannot appear any smaller than it already does now, but that doesn't look too bad to me. One thing I did notice is that it says sprite 1. We want to change that to laser just so we don't get confused. Okay, back to our rocket ship. We want to write some code so that we can move the rocket ship with the arrow keys. So let's go down here to events. When the green flag is clicked, we'll need a forever loop, and inside that loop we're going to put an if statement, and we're going to say if, where are we, key left arrow is pressed, then turn to the left 15 degrees. We want to duplicate this, and we'll say if key right arrow is pressed, and we're going to take our turn right 15 degrees. Let's test this out. So when I press left, the robot turns, or the spaceship turns to the left, and right over to the right. Okay, pretty good. Now we want to be able to move forward. So we'll duplicate this one more time, and we'll say if up arrow is pressed, and we'll say move 10 steps. Let's test that out. Left, right, and oh, that is not quite what we want. The rocket ship is moving to the right whenever we move up. So what that must mean is that our rocket ship is pointing in the wrong direction. We see that it's pointing in direction 90, so that when it moves forward, it's moving in this direction. We want it to point in direction 0, so that it's pointing straight up. Now when we move, the rocket ship moves in the direction we're pointing. The only problem is the sprite is rotated to the left. So let's have a look at the costume here and see what we can do about that. We could select the image, just rotate it like that. That looks a little bit better. Let's make it perfectly straight. And when our game starts, we're going to want our rocket ship to start in the center, to be pointing up, and to move when we press the arrow keys. We've got the moving part down here. So let's start in the center by using this block here. And remember, the center of the screen is at x0, y0. The right of the screen, the x increases, to the left it decreases, and y increases when we move up and decreases when we move down. So if we say 0, 0, we also want it to point straight up, so let's use this block here, point in direction 0. Okay, looks like we have it exactly how we'd like now. Next, we want to write a little bit of code to tell our rocket ship that when it reaches one edge of the screen, to reappear on the opposite edge. Right now, when we fly to the edges, our rocket ship just kind of gets stuck there until we turn around. So, let's go to my blocks, because we're going to make a new block to tell it to fly through the edges. We're going to call it fly through edges. And what that does is it gives us a space. It says define fly through edges. We're going to put some code down here to tell it what to do when it reaches the edge of the screen. So we're going to use an if statement. We're going to say if the x position reaches, let's see, the limit here is 261. So when the x position becomes 261, we want to change it to become minus 261 over here. We'll use our operators to do this. Greater than operator. And in motion, we'll take this block here to say if the x position, we don't actually want to use exactly 261, so let's make it a little bit shy of that and say 255. Then if the x position reaches more than 255, we're going to change it to become minus 250. Let's see what happens now. Not quite. What we've forgotten to do is we forgot to tell it to run this code. We've defined fly through edges, but we haven't told it to actually turn this code on. Back to my blocks, and we have a new block that says fly through edges, and we're going to put that inside our forever loop. Now, whenever we reach the edge of the screen on the right hand side, it should swap the x position to the left hand side. All we'll need to do now is rewrite this code for the left, the top, and the bottom. So nice and easily, we'll just duplicate this. We need to change our operator to a less than symbol. So we'll take our less than operator here and say if the x position is less than 255 or minus 255, change it to a positive 250. So we can fly through the right hand side of the screen and we can fly through the left hand side of the screen just like that. All we need to do now is write the same code for the y position. So let's duplicate both of those. We'll take out our x positions. We'll take these out, we don't need those now. And we'll put in our y position block here. Now the limits on the y-axis are a little bit different than the left axis. So the limit for y is positive 201 and negative 201. So let's say if the y position is greater than 195 or less than minus 195, set y to minus 190 and positive 190. Let's test this code out. Apply through the left, the right, the top, and the bottom, just like that. Excellent. Now, we want the rocket ship to be able to fire the laser here whenever we press the space key. And this is going to be a little bit tricky to do because we want to be able to fire the laser when we're anywhere on the screen, and we want the laser to come from the rocket. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to map the laser to move along with the rocket as you move around. And then whenever we hit the space key, we're going to create a clone of the laser and we're going to fire that clone forward. We'll show you what we mean in a second. So first things first, let's map the laser to stay with the rocket. So we'll go to events. When the game starts, we're going to point it in the same direction as the rocket when it starts. So we're going to say point in direction 0, and it points up along with the rocket. And then we want it to stay with the rocket as it moves around. We can have this block here that says go to rocket ship. We want it to always stay with the rocket, so we're going to put that in a forever loop like this. And what should happen is the laser should move with the rocket. You can kind of see it behind the rocket there. It's not pointing quite in the right direction though. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the code from our rocket, this code here. We're going to copy it over to our laser by dragging it, and we're going to say when we click the arrow keys to turn, we don't want it to move forward like that, we just want it to stay with the rocket ship. Now the laser is right behind the rocket ship, but it's hidden. If I hide the rocket ship like this, you should be able to see that we're moving the laser pointing in the direction that we're moving. Okay, let's bring our rocket ship back, go back to our laser code. Now, the laser is always with the rocket, but when we press the space key, we want a laser to fire out of the rocket. So we're going to go down to Control, and we have this block here that says when I start as a clone. We're going to take a forever loop and pop it below there, and we'll say when I start as a clone, move forward. We want it to move faster than the rocket, so let's, instead of 10, say 20 steps. Okay. Now, let's go back to our rocket ship code, and we will say when the space key is pressed, create a clone of the laser. So over here, I'm going to put it right onto here as well. And we're going to take a forever loop. We're going to say if space key is pressed, so we'll take our if statement, pop it in there, our sensing block, and here we are, key space is pressed. Then in control, we have this create clone. We're going to create clone of laser. Let's test this code out. When the space key is pressed, creates a clone of the laser. And our lasers, just like our rocket ship used to, are getting stuck on the edge of the screen. So we're going to need to do something about that. Let's go back over to our laser, and we'll say if it is touching the edge, sensing, and we have this touching block here, touching edge, then delete this clone. Let's test that out now. So it reaches just before the edge of the screen and it disappears. Now we're able to fire a lot of lasers. We want the game to be a little bit trickier, and we only want to be able to fire a laser perhaps once every second. So let's go back to our rocket ship clone, or our rocket ship sprite, and say when we create a clone of a laser, we're going to wait 1 second. While we're at it, let's add a sound effect. Let's go over here to sounds, and we have these sounds that came along with our backdrop. They're already loaded up. I like the sound of laser too. So when we create a clone of laser, let's start sound laser 2. Let's test that out. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. We've got a rocket ship that can fly all around the screen from the top to the bottom, from the left to the right, and we can fire one laser every second. Now we want to write some code to have the robots appear from random positions along the edges of the screen. So we're going to use an if statement here. And we're going to pop that right here. Oops. Right here when it starts as a clone. And we're going to use our operators and an equals operator and our pick random operator. We're going to say ask it to pick a number between 1 and 4 because we have 4 edges of the screen. And if the number is 1, let's have it come from the top edge of the screen. So we're going to go to motion and we'll say go to Y, where's the top edge of the screen? 170. Whoops. So we'll go Y 170, that's fine, and a random location on the X axis. So we'll take another pick random between minus 240 and 240. So now 1 in 4 chance, and our robot should appear from somewhere along the top left here. There we go. Okay. Now we need to do the same thing for 2, 3, and 4. So we'll duplicate just that part. We've gotten a little bit extra here. Let's get rid of that. And pop it here and say if the number is 2, and all we'll change here is have it come from the bottom edge of the screen. Now, let's test that out. Half of our robots should be coming from either the top or the bottom here. And we're not seeing much. Well, there's one from the bottom, okay, and one from the other side on the top. The majority of our robots are still coming from the same spot here. So I'm hoping that if we finish out our code and tell it what to do, if the number is 3 or 4, that we should have our robots coming from all 4 edges randomly. So we have our top edge and our bottom edge, and now we want our left and our right side. So our limit on our x-axis is 240. So we'll say start from minus 240. So it'll start from this side, and we'll pick a random number along the y-axis, which is going to be between minus 180 and 180. We'll do the very same for the opposite side, and hopefully our robots should start coming in from all sides. There's one from the bottom, there's one from the left, from the top, one from the right. Okay, I think we have it. Now all we need to do is write a little bit of code to tell the robot to delete the clone of itself if it's touching the laser. So we'll go to control, we'll take an if block, and we'll put that inside our forever loop down here, sensing, and we'll say if touching laser, and back to control, delete this clone. Let's test that out. Okay, that works. Let's add a little sound effect for when it gets hit by the laser. So we'll go to sounds again, and we have these sounds built into the robot sprite. I quite like the sound of this one. So when it gets hit by a laser, we'll play sound. Select. Okay, not bad. We want to add a score each time we hit a robot. So over to our variables, and each time change score by 1. And that seems to be working just fine. Let's make a little bit of code to say when it crashes into a ship. So we'll duplicate that code there and say if touching the rocket ship. Oh, what happened there? It touched the rocket ship, and it kept touching the rocket ship. It keeps increasing our score. We don't want that. We want it to change our lives by -1. And we also want it to disappear when it touches the rocket ship. Let's test that. Not bad. Okay, we'll change the sound. So let's find another sound. I'm not too fond of any of those sounds, so let's have a look in the library to see if we can find a particular sound that'll work. Let's go with that one. So it appears down here in our sounds, and we can call it like that. And each time it bumps into... Okay, the only thing that doesn't seem to be working quite right is, remember at the beginning of the game, of the video, we coded it to show the game over screen when the lives dropped below 0. So let's go back to our backdrops and have a look here. If lives are less than 0, switch backdrop to game over. So what I think is going on here is it is checking if the lives are below 0, but it is only checking once when the green flag is clicked. So to solve this problem, all we should need is to pop that inside a forever loop. Let's try that out. Okay, the next robot we hit should end the game. Yes, alright, we've done it. Well done, folks. You've just finished coding your very own robot attack game. Now, we've done quite a lot with this game. We've done quite a few new things as well. We've defined our own blocks to neaten up our code. We've used random number generators to randomize the speed in which the robots are generated off screen. And we've used a random number generator to randomize the position of the screen from which the robots come. We've tracked the laser to move with the ship and point in the direction of the ship and create a clone of itself to fire each time you press the spacebar. There's quite a few things all coming together to make a fully functioning game. A couple of things you could have a look at to improve your game if you'd like to stretch yourself. You could look at the way the ship moves. Right now it tracks identical to when you press the keys. You could look at using acceleration and deceleration, some variables there to make it move more realistically through space. You could look at the robots that come in off screen, varying their size and their speed, perhaps tracking their speed with your score to make the game more difficult as you progress. You could look at adding animations like we've done in previous games to animate the ship and the robots as they move. I think you should have fun with it, experiment, explore. If you come up with anything, we'd love you to tweet at EESWSTEMComey to show us what you've made. And yeah, that's it folks, well done. I'm looking forward to seeing you for the next tutorial.